Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's conversation on the topic youth and spirituality. As a young person, is it worth pursuing consciously a spiritual belief? Independent of other people's opinion, is that worth it, and is that beneficial for you to find something that suits you and pursue that? We're going to have a look and see that science says that yes, spirituality is positive, and we'll see how. And as a carer to a young person, is it worth encouraging young people to have spiritual beliefs or have spiritual practices in their lives, even if it's different from what we believe and what we do? And you will come to the conclusion probably that yes as well. So I looked at two researches, and because of the time that we have, I'm going to give the title so you can look more in depth. So the first one was Religion, Spirituality, and Health, the Research and Clinical Implications. And they looked at hundreds of research articles and publications that were data-based research. And what they found was that a large, and I quote this, a large volume of research shows that people who are more spiritual and in their situation, more religious and spiritual, have better mental health and adapt more quickly to health problems compared to those who are less spiritual. So we can see that there's a link between spirituality and improved mental health, because they actually looked at hundreds of research, and you can look for yourself. The other one was specific to young people and looking at if spirituality had offered any benefits to problems that normally teenagers go through, or at least they know somebody else that might be going through that, which is depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, substance misuse, very high risk behavior. And what they found is, and I'll quote the title, sorry, I didn't say the title. So it's Religion/Spirituality and Adolescent Psychiatric Symptoms, a Review. So this group of researchers, they looked at 115 articles. And what they found was that 92% of the articles reviewed found that at least one significant relationship, at least one, between spirituality and better mental health. And improved in various different areas, like I said, but specifically they said with great improvement when it came to the area of teenage substance use. So the more spiritual, the less problems they had with substance misuse. I'm also going to come back later to another very, very important research that was done in the 1800s, mid-1800s, by a group of science led by a man called Allan Kardec. But I'll come back to that later. So I'm in Melbourne, Australia. So I had a look at research on youth and spirituality in Australia. And I'm looking at two research. One is Australia's Generation Z study, or Generation Z study. And the other one is the Spirit of Generation Y. And what they found in these two studies, which are different age groups, is that despite seemingly that young people are moving away from traditional structured religion, it didn't necessarily mean that they were moving away from spirituality. And this is here in Australia, okay? And you can find all the stats if you look them up. So Australia's Generation Z study, or Z study, and the Spirit of Generation Y. And they also found that amongst these spiritual beliefs, 31% believed in reincarnation, and 22% said that maybe that it made sense to them. They also believed that some people do have psychic abilities, that they can perceive, they have extrasensorial perceptions, and that they can communicate with people in other dimensions. But before we continue, what is spirituality? So I'm adopting, you can look it up and you'll see that there's slightly different definitions, but I'm adopting the definition from the University of Minnesota. They have a Center for Spirituality and Healing, which their main focus is to advance well-being for individuals, for communities, for organizations. And that's within the University of Minnesota. And what they say is, spirituality is a broad concept with room for many perspectives. And that's exactly what the research in Australia found, that young people here, each one, even if they don't agree with everything that the other young people believes in, they kind of make sense themselves of what is reasonable for them to believe. And that's why I started with the question, is it worth, as a young person, if you're a young person, to pursue consciously, to make that choice for yourself? So again, spirituality is a broad concept with room for many perspectives. In general, it includes a sense of connection with something bigger than ourselves. And we're going to look at that. And typically involves a search for meaning in life. And why is it so important to connect with something bigger than ourselves? So when we say something bigger than ourselves, automatically we think perhaps an intelligence that's greater than ours. And in the research that I was talking about that was conducted in the mid-1800s by Allan Kardec and his team of researchers, what they did was they worked with psychics around the world in different continents. And because at that time they didn't have communication like we do right now, he sent these questions to the mediums to ask the spirits that they were communicating with for them to answer these questions. And what he did afterwards was he compiled all the answers, and the ones that were in common, he put together and created a book called The Spirit's Book. And this book changed my life as a teenager, so I recommend. But I also recommend other books that I wanted to talk about. One is the book written by Viktor Frankl. It's called A Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl, he was a young adult when he was taken to concentration camp, and he went through extreme trauma. And he came out and he actually started a school of philosophy focused on finding a meaning to life. Because when you find a meaning to life, you overcome. If you overcome challenges in your life that you might think that you're not able to. Beautiful book. I highly recommend that. And also 2 books from Edith Eger. She was also a young person. She was even younger than Viktor Frankl when she went to the concentration camp in the Second World War. She was a ballet dancer and she was 16. And she survived the concentration camp. And when she came out, she wrote books helping people to understand that the mental prisons that we create or that we have, they block our lives. So one of her books is called The Choice, Embrace the Possible, where she talks about these mental prisons. And there's another one called The Gift, 12 Lessons to Save Your Life, where she looks at each one of the mental prisons to help us free from that mental prison. But both of them, and even in the spirits, in all these 4 books, they talk about connecting to something greater than ourselves. And that might be a higher intelligence or a supreme intelligence, but it also might be, according to Viktor Frankl, something that you love or a worthy cause, sorry. and put that into practice, and that will help you overcome challenges and traumas. But also, if we are talking of spirituality, we cannot forget to mention what is happening in science in regards to, is there a supreme intelligence that some people call God? Is there something bigger than us that we can find in nature, we can find in our bodies, that healing? Where does that come from? So we can look at I'm going to give me 1 second so I won't quote it wrong. So we can look at people such as Greg Braden. He wrote several books talking about something greater than us and linking science with spirituality. So his books, Greg with double G, Braden, Bruce Lipton as well. He didn't believe in anything. He wasn't particularly spiritual, but in his research with stem cells, he discovered there was something above the physical that influenced the physical. So these people, and the Spirits book by Allan Kardec, compiled by Allan Kardec, and the Spirits book you can download for free. Also, look at immortality of the soul, right? If we know that we are more than just the body, that changes completely how we face life and how we look at life. And more of the modern people, besides the Spirits book, which I highly recommend, like I said, it changed my life. I recommend the research of Brian Weiss, Weiss, and Dr. Raymond Moody. So both of them, in their fields of work as a psychiatrist and as a psychologist, they found that with the near-death experiences, that people's soul continues after the body perishes. Reincarnation, where can we find information on that? So like I said, the Spirits book covers that as well. And Dr. Brian Weiss, there are other researchers, but this one, I know he's been researching for decades. And he has had hundreds, thousands of clients with hypnotherapy, where he actually regressed them to previous lives. And it's serious research. And the last aspect of spirituality is, if we know that there's a supreme intelligence and our soul continues and that we live many different lives, can we communicate with people who have passed and who are living in different dimensions? And parapsychology, which is a field that studies extrasensorial perception, they really look at people who have psychic abilities and what we can learn from them. So the Spirits book was also, I read it once, I heard somebody saying, so it's not coming from me, that the Spirits book is the most important interview of all times. Because what Allan Kardec did, similar to the parapsychology today, but he did it in the mid-1800s, was ask questions about life, about death, and about what happens after our body decease, after our body dies. And he collected that from the spirits communicating from a different realm. So it's worth having a look, even if it's for curiosity. And if it's not for you, maybe you that are watching as a young person or carer to a young person, maybe it's not for you at the moment, but it is for somebody that you know, because it doesn't have to be a specific spiritual belief, but it does have to be a positive belief system that connects us, like the University of Minnesota said, to something greater than ourselves, and connects us to finding a meaning to our lives and putting that into perspective. So we're coming to an end in the time that we have. So where do we start? Find reputable sources, scientific sources. And I already quoted or cited a few. And we know that young people are at the forefront of change, of societal change. And we know that they have the passion and determination. So if you're a young person, you'll identify with that, to change the world for themselves and for others around. But at the same time, because they're stepping out of childhood into adulthood, there's all the challenges that might come with changes in the body and changes in the mind and in the psyche. So there is there's a care that needs to be looked at for these young people. And science has proved that spirituality is a way. So I hope everyone watching this has a chance to look into that and to see what kind of spiritual belief might suit you the best. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you in another opportunity.